Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of OTH Sports View. I'm JP Butler. I'm joined by Shawn Campbell, and today we are talking Olean Oilers of the New York Collegiate Baseball League. Shawn has covered the team for the last 5 years. I've dabbled a little bit along the way. I was we were both around last year for Olean's NYCBL championship season. A year in which they won 14 of 17 to close out the year. They got really hot in the playoffs. They won, I think, six of seven in the playoffs and capped it off with a win over Oneonta in the championship series. We went in just about 2 weeks ago to talk to the team going into this season. They said that they were eager to defend that title this year. They thought they were going to be capable of doing that. They thought they were going to be able to pick up where they left off from last year, given what they had back, given the new guys they brought in. And so far, they've done just that. They're off to a 9-1 start here. They've won 8 games in a row. They've already opened up a 2.5-game lead in the West. They seem to be clicking on all cylinders right out of the gate here. Shawn, you've done every home game so far. What have you seen from this team that's, kind of allowed them to get off to this kind of start?
I mean, like you said, I think they have picked up where they left off from last year, and I don't know if it's really a coincidence. I mean, with 10 guys back, I think they just really wanted to kind of carry over from what they did last year. Right. And really solid all around pitching, hitting. I mean, I don't think Bobby Bell could really have any complaints in these first 10 games.
Expecting quite this level so far out of the gate. And you mentioned, last year, I think their pitching was pretty good and their offense was good enough to get them to the end. This year, the pitching has been great, and the offense has even been a little better, a little bit better as well. But with the pitching here, already in the early going. They're second in the league in earned runs, hits, and walks. They're first in strikeouts, and that's really only because the team that leads the league right now has only played 4 games, and Olean's played 10.
Yeah.
And then, individually, it starts with the 3 guys at the top: Sean Dubin, Aaron Phillips, Adam Rigney. These guys have combined to only give up 2 total earned runs all season long so far. How good has this group been in the early going?
I think I looked up, they've allowed 11 earned runs in 10 games. And that's pretty good. Yeah. And 5 shutouts. And, their ace from last year hasn't arrived yet and hasn't pitched, Austin Bizzle. He's expected to make his first start of the year Saturday. So when you throw him into the mix, I mean, they're just going to get that much better, I would think. But already they've had 6 different guys start, too, and really every single one of them's done pretty well. So it's almost like who's going to get knocked out of the rotation if they add another guy. Right,
and that's a good problem to have probably if you're that team right now. I want to just quickly ask about, I mentioned Sean Dubin. He's a local. He's an Allegheny Limestone graduate. Ended up, he had an interesting path that took him eventually to ECC and then to UB and then back to this area this summer. He's pitched twice now, both complete games. He's got 18 strikeouts in 17 innings, and he hasn't given up an earned run yet this year. I know you just did a story on him for today, Thursday's paper. Just give us a little bit of background about Sean's sort of path to the Oilers here and what he's brought to this team, especially in Bizzle's absence.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for him. I mean, going back to high school when he was at Allegheny Limestone, he really barely pitched. Through maybe 10 innings his senior year. People always kind of told him that, hey, you should be a pitcher. Just they saw something, he could throw pretty hard for being a small kid. Didn't really ever pick it up until he threw a bullpen for ECC. Kind of Evan Ryan from Olean kind of talked him into trying out. They needed another arm, and he did it, and the coach liked what he saw. He went up there and pitched for a semester and did pretty well. Got a few offers, landed at UB, and now here he is in Olean playing in the summer too.
And just lights out.
Yeah, so I mean, 2 games. The funny thing is he actually took their only loss so far, and they gave up 3 unearned runs in that game.
About a tough luck.
Yeah, and lost 3-2, and I mean very easily if they could have won that game and they could be 10-0 right now. Right. And then Saturday night in his last start, took a no-hitter into the 9th inning, lost it with 1 out, and very close to pitching the first no-hitter in Oilers' 5 years too. So I mean, it's really been incredible for him in those 2 starts.
And another guy I just want to mention individually because of the fact that he's done it on both sides here is Aaron Phillips from St. Bonaventure, so a lot of locals might recognize that name as well. He's been, part of that rotation that's been so good. 2 starts for him, only 9 hits and 13 innings pitched, and he hasn't given up a run. But here he is. He's also the league leader in RBIs and hits.
Yes.
He's got a pair of home runs on the year, I believe. How good has he been to have a guy like that who's doing it, in both ways for him?
Yeah, all around he's been tough, and he plays a pretty good first base too when he isn't pitching. He was actually the league's pitcher of the week in the first week. Won 2 games, didn't allow a run like you said. But hitting wise, I mean, he was pretty good last year when he was with the Oilers. But I was talking to Bobby Bell the other day, and he just was talking about how Aaron's just taken his hitting to another level. Just this past year at Bonaventure, he spent a lot of time in the cage, kind of just developing that swing. He's had a lot of big games already. I think he had a game with 6 RBIs, one of their first games of the year. Then the other night, he was 3 for 3, bases clearing triple.
Hitting the ball hard.
Yeah,
too.
it's just a lot of line drives, and he's been a guy who they really can count on. He's not the only one though, too.
Right. I mean, here you have, Jimmy Webb is 2nd in the league in RBI, and they've got one of the league's leaders batting average in David Yani, who's hitting 385. So really, again, it's not just the pitching. The pitching has been lights out, far and away, I think at this point, the best in the NYCBL, but the batting has been a little bit better this year.
Yeah, and I think that was their goal from what Bobby's said so far. Last year, the pitching was pretty solid, and sometimes the hitting was suspect, especially when they got off to kind of a so-so start.
Right. That's kind of the reason. I think they were 500.
Yeah, but then they kind of got hot at the end. But this year, when they were putting the roster together, they wanted to get a little more pop in the lineup and kind of give them even a better chance to win with pitching that they thought would be just as good or if not better than last year. And already in 10 games, they have 6 home runs. Last year, they hit 6 total the whole season. They have 3 guys with 2 of them, Aaron Phillips with 2, and then 2 kids from Pitt, Alex Griffith and David Yani, both have 2 so far.
Right. So really a lineup that as of this point, almost a quarter of the way through the season has almost no holes right now. And as we said, one of the most interesting things about that is that this is coming without probably their 2 best players. We talked about Bizzle from the pitching standpoint, but then there's also David Hollins from the hitting standpoint, who has only played 1 game. He made his debut on Tuesday night. And it's kind of an interesting situation for him, which we know you've addressed, is that the MLB draft is this weekend, starting tonight, actually. And it's kind of an interesting situation for him because he's expected to be drafted. He was drafted out of high school, but ended up going to college. And it's kind of an interesting situation with what he's going to do, depending on where he's picked. What do you know about that situation with Bubba, as they call him, and what can we sort of expect with that?
Just going to kind of wait and see. I think a lot of it just depends on where he goes. He wouldn't even admit that he expects to be drafted, which is kind of
being a little more humble than you.
Yeah, but I mean, he was already drafted out of high school. I don't think he's done anything to hurt his chances these past 2 years.
Only increased them.
It's really just a matter of if he thinks it's the right opportunity and wants to sign that contract this time, which, I mean, there might be a good chance of that happening.
And if not, that's another bat in the lineup. He was an NYCB All-Star last year. He and guys like Mike Farman, who's no longer here, are the guys that kind of really picked the offense up last year. So again, if you add him to a lineup that's already been this good, I mean, I would think that Olean should be probably in the driver's seat the rest of the way to maybe try and make it back-to-back here.
Especially, I mean, they're already getting out to a big lead to start the year, and they can just kind of keep building on that as they add players. They're still missing 2 guys from the University of Florida, and you figure they're probably pretty talented just playing at that level.
Right.
Just historically, given who they've had from there in the past, like Mike Farman. So, I mean, seems like a pretty good spot to be in.
They've built quite the roster here in Olean, and it's interesting for us to watch how far this whole thing has sort of come. Going back to 2012, their first year. And so we'll see how they end up doing. The Oilers are at home on Saturday night at 7 o'clock
Weather permitting.
at Bradner Stadium, weather permitting. And we will be back next week with a final Big 30 baseball and softball edition of the show. Our teams are wrapping up the playoffs. We have one remaining in Genesee Valley who will be at the state Final Four for Class D this weekend. Our major award winners will be announced over the weekend, and we will be back next week with a wrap-up show on that. So again, thank you for watching, and hopefully you can tune in next week.